which has been exhibited this late evening in this parliament.
Amna kura ambao kwamba imeweza kufanyika kisawasawa pale ndani.
Whatever that has happened today in the House is happening in Ethiopia or even Somali or even Southern Sudan. Muturi is a letdown and is a shame to the House.
The Speaker himself has threatened me on the floor of the House. He said if it was happening outside Parliament, he would fight me fiscally.
We were 234 when Don Duale led a hound of people away. All of them went.
Right after Thursday's dramatic events in the National Assembly, the role of the opposition in the country has come into sharp focus. Has the opposition abandoned its role? Some actually saying, has the opposition, or is the opposition dead? Text us 22422. On Twitter is the hashtag Newsnight, and keep talking to us. Our guest in studio tonight, former Kakamega Senator, Deputy Party Leader for Kenya, Dr. Boni Khalwale, former MP Jakoyo Midiwo, also former Minority Whip, but of course a key member of the opposition then in Parliament. And guess, look at who's joining us again tonight. Kimani Ichung'wah, MP Kikuyu. You all realize Honorable Junaid Mohammed was supposed to be with us tonight, but he's not coming. But the show, of course, has to go on. Both of you have said the opposition is dead. There's nothing like the opposition in Parliament or in the country. Ichung'wah, of course, you're not in the opposition, but after the handshake, which many people are blaming this for, what is your view on that? Do you still consider opposition playing its role in Kenya?
I don't think opposition is dead, because if the opposition political parties that were in the minority in the National Assembly, even if they didn't want to play the role of the opposition, new opposition forces will emerge naturally. That is what happens.
If
remember,
they don't
during
want to play.
the Grand Coalition government, there were backbenchers who formed themselves into some sort of a more fast opposition. Therefore, you really can't say that opposition is dead per se. It's not dead.
You're saying if they don't want to play their role?
If they are unwilling,
are they playing their
or
role? That's the
unable,
question.
To an extent, yes. To an extent, not.
I mean, what kind of answer is that? I mean, are they playing their role or not? Okay, explain why you're saying to an extent yes or not.
Well, because I find at times when it's issues, let me say they're playing their role.
They're playing their role, okay.
When it's an issue where you need to come together as a nation for the benefit of the nation, then they come together. When it suits their politics, then they play their politics, opposition politics.
Honorable Midiwo, what do you make of this?
I don't know what to make of what the Budget Committee Chair has said. But I can only tell you that I think for us who have gone out there to support this handshake, I personally never believed it's supposed to kill opposition. Like
to kill opposition?
Kill opposition, like it's emerging. First of all, Uhuru doesn't sit in Parliament. Raila doesn't sit in Parliament. But they thought between the two of them that we needed to go a different direction. That does not mean that MPs do wrong things to Kenyans. I mean, it's been two very wrong things in the last 2 months. Number one, the one to do with sugar. And let me congratulate Wamuchomba for standing her ground, because all of us saw what happened. In fact, the lady called Gede, why she would be lobbying against the passage or the passage of that report. She doesn't grow sugar. She doesn't come from the sugar area. Who was she bidding for? You know, her story doesn't make sense. But back
although she's been accused and she's defending herself, not saying she's playing the role.
Everybody's defending themselves. We have been watching a court drama all day today of defense lawyers. It's like we always say, you must defend yourself even when you are caught with your pants down. But the opposition in this case, how do you say they're alive? If, for example, the whip of minority comes from the sugar belt, he comes from the lake. In the lake, this fuel thing, around the lake, very few people have cars. What we have is motorbikes, we use lanterns, then we use the other lighting equipment that uses kerosene. Then we only use lanterns again and the motorboats and piki-pikis. All that is fuel. As I tell you today, fuel went to about 130 shillings in Kisumu. It's not gone back down, even with the bill coming into play. Secondly, meat has gone up. Everything is going to go up. You know, when I see leaders say that cows don't use fuel, how do you feed them? And you see, you know, somebody as big as the highest, second highest office holder in the country, when you say it doesn't affect farmers, I mean, is it that we are in a job we don't understand? Or is it that something has gone so wrong that we just need to tell our people?
So all these things you think are issues that the opposition should have been very vocal
Those
about,
are issues
and they've let down Kenyans?
They have let down Kenyans.
And you're saying the handshake should not have killed the opposition's role, but you think you'll blame it on the handshake? Is that what you're saying, in other words?
Well, from what ODM called, NASA called a PG to go and support increment on tax on fuel. What are we saying here? The NASA should have called a PG to go and reject that thing. Because NASA zones are even, you know, this thing affects all Kenyans. They are also affected. But the reason why they are in opposition is so that they don't go to sleep with government. And this handshake was done in OP, not in Parliament.
Okay, Fabian, okay, I see Honorable Ishingo wants to respond to that. Honorable Kalori will speak shortly. Ishingo.
You know, when Jakoyo says that the opposition should have held their PG, or rather NASA or ODM should have held a PG to oppose the finance bill, that's why Hussein, I said, when the opposition, or perceived minority in the House, finds it that a matter before the House is in the best interest of the country. And I think that is what informed the handshake, really. As Jakoyo says, I don't think anybody intended to kill the opposition. But where we come together as a nation after our very divisive politics of 2017, if we need to come together and make decisions that are in the best interest of the people, then there is no problem at all with the minority coming together and holding a PG to make a decision that is in the best interest. And in any case, I would rather we move the discussion then as to the reasons why those of us who supported the Finance Bill 2018 did support. And that informs the reasons probably why those in the minority also supported. Remember, there are also others, because there were divergent views. There are others in the minority who did not support. There are also others in Jubilee who did not support. Okay. And everybody had their own reasons.
But remember, this is the same opposition that was faulting the Jubilee Party and the government then, and even now, for suffocating the country with debt, talking about how the country was messing the economy, yet they decided to support them with conditions.
Remember the amendment that came in the finance bill to take VAT to 0% from 16% was sponsored by the minority whip, Junet Mohammed, who was to be here tonight. But after deliberations and after a lot of information coming into play and that information being shared even with the minority, remember they also sit in some of the committees in Parliament that get appraised with all this information. Okay. A lot of information that is not in the public domain. I heard Jakoyo speak about the borders and the fuel and even what the Deputy President was asking about cows not consuming fuel. The conversation we should be moving, and that's what informed. I raised the same issue in Narok on Sunday, and I did ask. I've been a butcher for many years, Hussein. And we move cattle from Suswa, from Kajiado to Dagoretti on foot. Slaughter it in Dagoretti, but we will take advantage of the increment of fuel prices to increase the price of meat. Therefore, the conversation then we should be having as a country, are we also as Kenyans, as business people, taking undue advantage of each other? Why is it that today, even after fuel has gone down by almost 10 shillings, those who increased fair prices
have not brought them down? But the issues about factors of production and what it does to the cost of production in the country, but that's besides the point. Dr. Boni Khalwale, of course, your party leader, they're all talking about NASA calling for this press briefing to agree to support with conditions that they give that position on the taxation on petroleum products. Your party leader said Ford Kenya was not part of it, which again just shows how the opposition is in disarray.
Yeah. Precisely, and that quickly responds to what my brother Jakoyo has suggested, that it was NASA the position of whipping members of of parliament from the opposition to have a common position on this bill was not a decision of NASA. It was a decision of the Orange Democratic Movement. You have made that bed, please lie in it.
I was never
Let me tell you.
You
Let me
guys
tell you.
kicked me out.
But Chris Wamalwa was in that meeting.
Okay, we saw Wiper MPs
Dan
in that
Maanzo
meeting.
was there.
Chris Wamalwa is trying to earn a job that was doled to him as a deputy whip when Wetangula was de-whipped. The position of the Ford Kenya party was that we were all going to follow him suit. So when Chris refused, he has to earn his job. And that's exactly what he was doing. But the point I wanted to make is that the bigger picture, unfortunately, Kenyans, is that what we are seeing is an attempt by the leadership of the country to rep the 2010 Constitution. Don't be upset by those strong words. It's true. You will remember that upon its promulgation, the spirit of the Constitution was such that Nancy Barasa, by dint of just twisting the nose of that young lady, she lost her job. That was the letter and spirit of Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity.
Right.
Today, Raila Odinga leads his troops out of the opposition, takes them into the government, and thanks to impunity, still expects that his troops can maintain positions of leadership reserved under the Constitution for the minority. Mudavadi and Wetangula have got MPs who could sit on those positions, but they are frustrated because Raila doesn't want to move and leave space for people who are opposition-minded. Now, with due respect to my party leader, Wetangula, and my other sister party leader, Mudavadi, they are trying to be gentlemen. There's no point of being a gentleman. This power will not be given. They should start behaving badly in a good way by demanding their positions in parliament as the opposition.
Okay.
But so when you leave a man in government like Mbadi to drive the opposition's agenda in the House, the consequences is what you saw on the finance bill.
But Ford Kenya has MPs in the House. Ford Kenya is a party, which we still assume is in the National Super Alliance.
Yes.
So why didn't you give a position, for example, on this matter? You were silent. If you're saying it's ODM who did it, we saw Mbadi as the minority leader coming there and reading that statement on behalf of NASA.
And Wiper too gave a position.
If there was no impunity, what Mbadi and Junet should have done, they should have joined Ijungwa and said that that statement by the opposition cannot come from us, as we are latter-day members of the government side. Then Wetangula would fumble around and see who is the best amongst the ANC and Ford Kenya members of parliament to play that role. Really, what is happening is that we are abusing Chapter 6 at the highest level.
Okay, regardless, sorry, just before that, regardless of what you think they should have done.
Yes.
Ford Kenya could still do this on its own. Ford Kenya could give a position on its own.
Yes.
Could rally MPs on its own.
Yes.
We didn't see that from you.
Yes.
I mean, what kind of opposition role are you playing?
Because, you know, in parliamentary palace, there is something called the right of reply. When the opposition moves a motion on, say, the finance bill, the right of reply is reserved for the leader of the minority. Now, when Mbadi is sitting there, when he takes the right of reply, he then pushes the government agenda. But if they had respected the letter and spirit of Chapter 6, they would have moved out, and then maybe somebody else from Ford Kenya or ANC would be doing that job.
Okay.
I think Hussein,
that's why this constitution was put there, to be respected so as to control behavior and the way of doing things.
You know, Bonnie is looking for a job for Wetangula. Musalia, that
has no job to give anybody.
The job which is there, which is of the opposition. I had said somewhere else today in another forum, that I have watched since the sugar thing, Musalia talking every other day. He's doing the right thing, except he's not in parliament. When the leader of minority walks out away from a vote,
Yes.
when people are going to vote, Hussein, on sugar that has mercury, and you don't see the whip, who is supposed to whip people? When the leader of minority talks like he's seconding Duale, where do you want Kenyans to go with sugar in the mercury? Like I said, because there were accusations of bribery, you don't expect Parliament to investigate itself. Parliament, by the time I left, had about 50 CID officers. You cannot distribute money to people without, what is the work of those CIDs? Where Kenya has reached, some people must go to prison. At least arraign them in court so that we can begin to talk about our future. The opportunity that the handshake has given us. Let me ask the chair of Budget Committee, because he was going to talk. If you collect only 1.2 trillion, how does Budget Committee allow a budget of over 3 trillion? Kibaki took over this government when we were collecting only 220 billion, and thanks to my friend Michael Waweru. We were living within our budget. In the first term of Kibaki, he never borrowed money. And now we were saying, I saw when the leader of opposition, Raila, says, stop borrowing, you are going to drive us to a corner.
But now it has changed.
Yeah. And in fact, I was shocked when I saw him congratulating Uhuru for passing that thing. Because 8% tax is nothing to joke with in an industry that affects all facets of our lives. It is not a joke. Venezuela is one of the world's leading oil producers, has 1,000,000% inflation rate as we speak. Venezuelans are now lining for food rationing. So you don't play with people's lives like that.
And we'll listen to what Raila said when I interviewed him a few weeks ago about this specific issue and whether the opposition is dead. We'll listen to him shortly. Yes.
Let me say this. One, you remember former Prime Minister Raila Odinga speaking, I think in Kisumu or somewhere in Bondo, just before, when the president was away out of the country. And he asserted with a lot of certainty that he was certain that His Excellency the President would come and assent to the finance bill as it were. But given the difficult circumstances that the President was put in, and Jacob says it, we are not fully funding our budget. We don't have a balanced budget in terms of our revenue and our expenditure. And it's a fallacy to even purport that the Kibaki regime never borrowed. Thika Road was built during the Kibaki regime. It was not built from our resources, and so many other projects. Therefore, let me finish. You made your point, Jacob. We cannot say that the Kibaki regime never borrowed. They did borrow. We may have borrowed a little bit, much more than
a little bit.
Yeah.
From one.
Let me finish. Let me finish. We may have borrowed, but again, look at the circumstances.
From 1.6 to about 5.
President Uhuru Kenyatta made it very clear when, in his memorandum before the day he sent back his memorandum to Parliament, I think the other Thursday, he did a statement where he started by taking you back to where we are as a country and where we are coming from. From a country where we never had county governments to give money to during the Kibaki regime, to a situation now where you have all this expanded bureaucracy with the coming of the new constitution. And these are challenges, and that's where I would agree when Jacoyo speaks fondly about Michael Waweru. And I've said it, and I would want to state it here again. We have a problem with KRA. That one is a problem that is there.
Okay.
We are not able to collect the kind of revenues that this economy has a capacity to collect because of probably inadequacies within the senior management of KRA.
All right.
That being a topic for another day, ask yourself, Junet, even as we rightly or wrongly accuse the opposition, when the president made his considered decision to reduce 16% to 8%, it was a middle ground. And he came that with reasons and told the country, this is where we are, this is the kind of budget that we have come up with. Things that are not discretionary. There are those that are discretionary in terms of recurrent expenditure that we can reduce. And he brought that finance bill accompanied by a supplementary appropriations bill that was only increasing money allocated to the judiciary, and money coming from donors, not from GOK,
right.
not from.
Fair enough. I mean,
therefore, it was a balance.
It was a balance according to the president.
And I would have been happy, because it's one thing to tell the opposition oppose for the sake of opposing. It's a different thing to say the opposition in the House can support government agenda or what makes sense.
They can, isn't it? Yeah.
They
and
can,
that is what they were
should.
saying. They were caught between a rock and a hard place, and they decided that this
it is not a question of opposing for the sake of opposing. If the opposition in Parliament was functional, Honorable Ichung'wah, then there would have been debate and consideration of that proposal by the President. For example, when the President proposed that taxation for betting should move from 35% to 15%, members of Parliament would have said, no, the people of betting, let it be at 30%, and other poverty-associated taxes should be lower. But because the whole opposition has become government, Ichung'wah, it was just a question of singing Bado ma bam, bano ma bam. A lot of rubbish.
You respond to him.
That is the problem.
You will respond to him. Let's go to Kisumu. Let's go live to Kisumu. There's a member of another sister party of NASA of Boni Khalwale.
Yes.
Nominated MP Geoffrey Osotsi of ANC. You've been following the conversation. What do you think of the role of the opposition, which is now being criticized for abandoning its role, really?
Good evening, Hussein and the other colleagues in the station. Well, I've been listening to what my colleagues have been discussing, and let me start by clarifying on the issue of whether the opposition in Parliament is functional or not. I think we must understand that with the new constitution coming in force, we no longer have the government and the opposition side in Parliament. What we have is the majority party and the minority party, where the majority party is the party with the highest number of members, or a coalition with the highest number of members, and the minority is the party with the second highest number of members, or a coalition with the second highest number of members. So in this case, we have Jubilee as the majority party, and we have NASA as minority party. So that's how we operate in Parliament as per the Constitution. We do not have the opposition and we don't have the government. So us as NASA, we had intense discussions inside the House on how we are going to approach the finance bill. And our minority leader, Honorable Mbadi, made a pronouncement that we are not going to support the finance bill. And that position, we took it because we thought that we could still raise the money the government wanted from the finance bill by reorganizing the budget. But later on, Honorable Mbadi had a different idea. So when we went to the meeting at the Orange House, the NASA meeting, which was attended by members from all parties, ANC, ODM, Wiper, and Ford Kenya. And we had very healthy discussions. And eventually we agreed that we will be guided by our own conscience. So for me, I made a stand that I will oppose the finance bill. And I was guided by my own consideration. The first consideration is that I thought we do not need to overburden Kenyans with more taxes when we can easily reorganize the budget to do away with some allocations and save money for other purposes. And indeed,
I began by asking you,
budget
committee, if you can hear me,
which Honorable Ichung'wah is chairing, came back to Parliament with a report indicating that they could save 37.5 billion shillings through budget cuts on some votes. And that means we only remained with 30 billion shillings, because in Honorable Uhuru's memorandum, he was looking for 67.5 billion shillings. So we still had a chance to do further cuts and save Kenyans from paying more taxes.
Honorable Sotsi, if you can hear me now.
So that was my first
if you can hear
reason
me.
of objecting to the finance bill. The second reason is that this country loses up to 1 trillion shillings through tax evasion. Multinationals alone, they make us lose about 700 billion shillings.
Okay, we seem to have he can't hear us in studio, but you are responding to Honorable Khalwale, and of course what he's saying in the new constitutional dispensation about majority and minority party. Of course, Honorable Sotsi was in that meeting that said it will support the 8% tax on petroleum products. He's saying he will follow his conscience after that. I don't know again what that says about NASA and party positions and what it means about the opposition.
But what you're saying here is the dead opposition. You know, what is the work of the whip?
And that is the question he didn't answer.
That he actually did. But don't you think that is where the problem lies? That MPs use their conscience after they attend a PG and agree. That the leader of minority or otherwise walks away from his troops. That is just what you brought us here to talk about. Let me tell you what these people did. If you want to know, there is no opposition in parliament. That morning, they passed the estimates. Yeah. You cannot pass the estimates without a budget. Before the budget. That is unlawful. There's nobody to speak for Kenyans. What were you passing the estimates on? It meant that budget the finance bill had to be forced onto Kenyans.
Okay. We have seen in recent days some appointments, and you talked about them on Twitter before, of parastatals, and we've seen some opposition faithful, or NASA faithful. Even Norman Magaya, the CEO, has just been appointed to a board.
Exactly.
Honorable Ishungwa, you're talking about party positions, and Honorable Midio has just brought it out very well. Do you think, in all honesty, maybe this is a yes or no question, if it were not for the handshake, would Raila Odinga and NASA have supported what happened in Parliament? Would they have supported this tax on petroleum products?
To be honest, I don't really believe that they would have supported why not for the handshake.
So that, it had an effect?
If you ask me, there are certain aspects of the handshake I completely don't agree with. But to the extent that the handshake will bring tranquility and some sort of peaceful coexistence and be able to look at issues on merit, that for me is a good thing for this country, and to that extent I support the handshake. Two, it is not true, and it's unfortunate, I heard Honorable Sotsi speak about issues that the appropriations bill that was there was reducing the budget by about 37 billion shillings. But I did allude to the fact that when His Excellency the President sent back that finance bill, it came together with an appropriations bill. It is not true that we passed the appropriations bill. We didn't have that opportunity because we were to do that right after the finance bill. If you ask me about the role the opposition or anybody who would have wanted to oppose this finance bill ought to have played. One is to be alive to the provisions of Article 115 of the Constitution. I've seen a lot of, even a lot of drama, even on social media, people saying the Speaker did not make a decision that was right, the ayes and the nays, the ayes had it. But a careful reading of Article 115, sub-Article 4 of the Constitution will tell you what informed the Speaker's decision. Two, if you look at the way on any aspect that needed two-thirds majority in Parliament for voting, that has always been the case. That until you call for division or roll call and people are able to, you are certain, the Speaker must justify herself or himself that indeed 233 or two-thirds members through account are opposing to negate the memorandum. Two, it was incumbent on those who were opposing to oppose it on the basis of facts and figures. What I saw in Parliament that day was drama that was just geared towards misleading the public. Trying to portray, some people portraying themselves as the ones fighting for Wanjiku, those who are calling themselves the Zero Movement. But if you ask them, if there's anybody who brought an amendment to that memorandum by the President, none. The only reason why they would never have allowed either an electronic vote or a roll call vote It's because they knew the truth.
Okay.
And theirs was hypocritical, was to lie to Kenyans that you're speaking to them. They can never look at Kenyans straight in the eye, Hussein, and tell Kenyans that if you are not able to balance these 37 billion shillings that we are reducing from our expenditure, if you kill this finance bill, as it were, the finance bill was not just talking about
there's some who say,
fuel.
There's some who say the other places where you can see the other places
130 billion shillings deficit, which would have lumped on to a deficit of 562 billion.
There are those who say there are still other places they could have these budget cuts. But let me get let's listen
Where
to
were
what
those proposals on the floor?
Let's listen to what ODM leader Raila Odinga had to say some weeks ago when I asked him about this question about the role of the opposition.
We can now implement jointly, and we can tell the executive, do this, do this, do this, okay? And you see more actions being taken this way.
Okay.
I've just told you that when we had a adversarial relationship with the executive, you tended to see the executive coming together and being defensive.
Okay.
Okay. But now the executive is actually looking inward.
All right. Yeah. Saying, and I mean, it's saying we need to look at the other way, that there was a problem when it was very adversarial. As you wind up, as you get your winding comments, what do you think of what Honorable Odinga said? But before you say that, we have Honorable Kaluma on phone. You can have him very briefly just tell us about what he thinks about the opposition's role. Honorable Kaluma, go ahead.
Yes. Hussein, we passed the new constitution in 2010, but we are still living in the hangover of the independence constitution. The opposition is not dead now. The opposition was killed by Kenyans when we passed the new constitution. And I think there should be a change in terms of how we approach, the matter of parliamentary governance going into the future. The challenge we've had in Parliament is that we have Jubilee members like Ichung'wah who think they are speaking for the executive. And I think the progress when we debated the finance bill is the best thing that ever happened to Kenyans. That for the first time in the life of Parliament under the current constitution, members of Parliament were able to converge around issues, whether opposing taxation or supporting it. And this one was across the aisle. Of course, less than 10 people purport to have passed the bill, but I think it is something we need to consolidate, going forward. So there is no position. We have our conscience and we have our positions as representatives of the people to make on this matter.
Thank you, Honorable Kaluma. Seems to agree with both of you. As you wind up,
As I wind up, I want to agree with his position because in this particular vote, Jubilee had a PG. NASA had a PG. If there is no position and they're together, if there is no position and they're together, so why were they fighting? Why were they singing in Parliament? There is a fundamental problem. The other thing, this is not about the handshake. The handshake has given us an opportunity to do right by Kenyans, not to do wrong. When the MPs misunderstand it and go to Parliament and give Kenyans sugar with mercury just for 10,000 shillings, something is not right.
All right, Honorable Khalid, finally.
My brother Ichung'wah, you're going to go down in history as the worst chair of Finance Committee.
Budget.
Finance. Yeah, okay, and budget. Because I remember in the old dispensation, when Mutahi Kagwe was in your position, when Soita Shitanda was in your position, when Oburu Odinga was in your position, they were faced with similar challenges. But they rose to defend Mwananchi. What is it that you can tell Mwananchi today, here in Kabete, that you did to ensure that the price of kerosene be lower than the price of diesel?
Okay.
Now, so that you don't kill me on this one, let me tell you, what all of you did is that you were whipped by Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga to take a position that was unfriendly to the people. Then you went and created a position as members of parliament to go and engage in showmanship, to cheat wananchi that you are defending them.
Okay. Ishungwa, finally.
I'll agree with Bonnie. One, there was a lot of showmanship and a lot of drama for people lying to the public that you are defending. But I will tell you, first, I'm not the chairman of finance, and all the people you have spoken about were chairman of finance, and taxation matters are in the finance committee. But as chairman budget, I will look at you straight in the eye, Bonnie, and tell you that the budget that we passed, with the kind of deficit that we have, in terms of us not having a balanced budget, if we do not have the revenues that we are projecting to collect, we would have sunk this country into a deeper hole. We have commitments that we have made to investors who have invested in this country. Hussein Mohammed. We have investors who have invested through Eurobond and other government bonds. That the commitments that we...
Un, dos, tres. Un, dos, tres.